Hi, I'm Peter Reynolds. I'm a senior consultant with ARC Advisory Group, and today we're going to be talking with Marc Leroux. Marc is the marketing manager for ABB's Collaborative Production Management. Hi, Marc. Good to have you.
Thanks, Peter. Glad to be here.
So, Marc, why don't you just tell me about what you do at ABB and tell me about ABB's mission.
Well, I've got a really interesting position at ABB, Peter. I work for a R&D organization within process automation, which is one of our major sectors that we have going to market. And the charter that I have is for information systems. So it's an interesting world to be working in, and we get to talk about and we get to work with and play with some really interesting technologies.
Tell me about integration of business systems with manufacturing systems. There seems to be very little progress in that today. So can you give me ABB's perspective on what's happening and why this is important for manufacturing?
Sure. It's a great question. When I first started working in process industries, and that was a very, very long time ago, and I think we'd maybe just leave it at that, we were talking about islands of information. We were talking about islands of automation. And now, 30 some odd years later, we're still talking about islands of information and islands of automation. And I was in a customer not so long ago, and we were talking about the systems that he had. And he was saying that he basically has 20 some odd systems that he knows about, and probably a number that he doesn't know about. And they all have their information, they all keep it within their own repositories, within their own databases, and there's no real way to easily access the knowledge that is contained inside of this. So it really is a challenge. It's been here for a long time, and I think we're still starting to uncover how we can best leverage this. I think a couple of key points that I'd like to make. One of them is that when we talk about integration, it's a great word and a lot of people use it, but it has so many different meanings to so many different people. And one of the things that I like to make sure we're aware of when we're talking about this is that there's a difference between interfacing and integration. And I think a lot of people just use the term interchangeably, but to me, interfacing is when you take data from one system and you replicate it, you copy it into another system. Whereas integration is actually leaving the data where it resides and just referencing that data. And that's a key tenet to virtually everything that ABB has been working on for the past at least 15 years. Within our control system platform, our System 800XA, embedded that technology right up front. We didn't want to be able to we didn't want to have to replicate the information, because then you're just making another copy. And I have an IT background, and from an IT perspective, when you start talking about interfacing and copying information and making it available in two spots, then if either one of them is wrong, then both are wrong, because you don't know which one to trust. Right? So it's a lot easier for us to leave the information where it is and just reference it, and reference it with the proper context. So I think that there's that fundamental difference in how we are approaching the problem. But I think going back to your original question, why are we still in this state? I think that a lot of the ERP system implementations envisioned that this was going to happen, that we were going to have seamless access to information. When we start looking back at when ERP systems were really being implemented in large numbers around the turn of the century, around 1999, 2000, what we found is that people ran out of money. And it was a lot harder to do that integration. Frankly, technology wasn't there to do it. Technology has made massive strides forward. Standards have done a lot to making it easier to get information from other systems. So we've had changes in technology, we've had changes in standards, it's made it easier to do this. But fundamentally, I think that the mindset of people is still on a point-to-point interfacing. And I know, talking to a customer, that we had done a project with them. And the project was very simple. The scope that they had in mind was just get a production order from my ERP system and bring it down to manufacturing. That's all I want to do. And we said, there's so much more that you could actually do. And the customer said, look, we have a limited budget. this is what we want to do. Now, we were able, using technology that we've developed and using the standards that are applicable today, we were able to do that job in probably a couple of days on site. And the customer thought, wow, I was expecting that this was going to be a month's worth of effort. So then he asked the question, what else can we do? Would I be able to get raw material usages and bring those back up in real time? And we were able to do that. And we were able to get more up-to-date manufacturing information. And he had a major problem that people weren't even aware that they could address, and that was the demurrage on trucks that were waiting for the product.
Sure.
And now he gets his trucks just in time. So he's eliminated his demurrage charges, he's getting more accurate raw material. And this is really the way that integration should work. It shouldn't be just point to point, it should be all-encompassing. And that's, my title is that I work in collaborative production management, and this is what we mean by collaborative production management.
Yeah, well, Marc, that's good insight. This concept of big data is being used by quite a few technology suppliers today, and it seems like the more storage space decreases, people save things forever, and there's just more and more data for people to deal with, and they say. End users say they're drowning in data and they don't have enough information. What can you tell me about ABB's perspective about big data?
Well, I think that first, it's a term that is widely used, and there's not a lot of definition behind it. But I think big data is data that's in the exabyte type range. It's massive amounts of data, and the problem becomes, how do you deal with that? How do you take all of that data and actually just bring it down to something that a plant manager can understand? And for a long time, I've had the concept that if you put a dashboard on a plant manager's desk, chances are it's got to be very simple. He's got too many other things that are competing with his time. So if you could just make it a stoplight, that it's green, it's yellow, it's red. Now, how do you take all of that data and bring it in and make that? And for that, you need analytics. You need to have something that can actually take all of the data and wade through it, and then come down to the point where you actually have the green, yellow, red type approach. But the problem is very big, and it's growing. When we talk about things like smart grid, everybody has been talking about it for the last several years. We start looking at how you're getting millions of different devices connected up. And each of those devices has multiple values associated with it. So all of a sudden you're dealing with a network of millions and millions of devices. And each of those can have very high update rates. And we see that as well. So you're talking about how do you deal with data capture in the millions of values per second. So it becomes a really challenging problem for an R&D perspective. How do you have something that can capture this information? Once you've got it, then you've got the analytics, and the analytics is a big part. But the first step is, how do you make all of this data available? And that requires new technologies and new ways of thinking about the problems.
Okay, that's very interesting. Now, I really just got one last question. Cloud computing. Recent suppliers and technology providers have talked about taking plant historical data to the cloud. Can you briefly tell me about ABB's perspective on cloud computing?
Well, cloud computing, again, Peter, is it's a term that a lot of people are using in different ways, because it can be infrastructure as a service, where you're just hosting or somebody is hosting the infrastructure for you. It can be software as a service, and that's probably what most people think about when you talk about cloud computing. When you start talking about getting manufacturing data, you have to have a couple of things in mind. How do you keep that data secure? How do you get it from the manufacturing facility and bring it up to the cloud in a secure fashion? And in a way, that actually presents opportunities, because people have been talking about how do you secure control systems for years. And if you have the right technology in place, then what you're doing is you're taking the information, you're making it available outside the control system, so anything that's using it has no impact on what's happening in the actual manufacturing process. And that's a good thing from a security perspective. But when you get the information up there, you also have to make sure that it's segmented correctly, that you have people that are using the information that have the right to use it. And you have to make sure that the granularity is such that you can bring it down to almost the instance of data level. And it becomes an interesting way to get the data up there. But the real benefit that we're seeing is that when it is available in the cloud, then people are starting to think about it as, I can access this with my phone, I can access this with my iPad, I have access to the information wherever I am, and that means that I can make better business decisions, I can make better business decisions faster. And that is what's going to make the transformation of manufacturing, in my opinion.
Okay, Marc, it's been great talking to you. I really appreciate this time.
Thanks, Peter.
I'm Peter Reynolds with ARC Advisory Group. I've been talking with Marc Leroux, Marketing Manager for ABB's Collaborative Production Management. Thanks for watching.